already heard this, but some of you are here for the first time, having heard about us on the radio or whatever. I want to give you a brief thumbnail sketch of what Brass Roots is, and what we're all about. First of all, my name is John Kuhn. I'm the chairman of the board of Brass Roots. And Brass Roots was founded, back in, kind of got its start in '94 during my Senate campaign, but we weren't really Brass Roots back then. That was a campaign. After that campaign in '95, I wanted to keep the energy going that I saw in the pro-gun movement in this state and address some of the frustrations that I felt about how things were being done. And I didn't think that we were really complete in our approach to the whole war to get our firearms rights back. I looked at the various organizations that there were, organizations like Michigan Gun Owners, which didn't exist then either, but there were others similar to it that kind of gave rise to Michigan Gun Owners. They were good on the volunteer end of it, and of course the National Rifle Association, which was great in some aspects as well, particularly in the lobbying end of it. What I did not see being done anywhere is I didn't see anybody who was really stand up and willing to be the bad guy and take the heat when necessary. And I thought that was something that was necessary, and when I gathered together some of the people that worked with me on the campaign and we started talking about it, everybody agreed that it's something that was necessary. National Rifle Association has to play the role they do. Sometimes they have to take small victories and be happy and content with them. We don't. We don't because of the way we're structured. One of the problems that I identified when I looked at the way things are typically done, you look at campaigns and the way they're funded, and the first thing you see is that political action committees are limited. The National Rifle Association can only contribute $5,000 to a federal campaign. That's it. That's all. That's the maximum amount of your money that can go into any particular federal campaign. We're talking about $1 million campaigns and higher. The campaign I was in, the winner spent well over $7 million. The loser, second place loser, spent over $3 million. $5,000 of your money is all that can go into a campaign like that. Just think about the ratios there. I did, and that's one of the weaknesses that I saw. It's one of the reasons why we formed Brass Roots. Brass Roots is an organization whose sole purpose is to remove from office politicians and judges who don't understand what the right to keep and bear arms means. And we do it in a way that means that we aren't subject to PAC limitations, because we don't take the money from you. Instead, we target the races that we think are the most likely to have the greatest impact on the right to keep and bear arms. We tell you which ones we've picked, and we rely on you to send your donations to the opponents. Does it work? You know, a couple years ago, we had to guess whether it would work or not. Now, if you want to know if it works, ask former State Representative James Ryan if it works. Yeah, you ask people officially in the know, and you'll get all kinds of backdoor answers to the question as to whether or not it works. But if you sit in the right restaurants in Lansing and listen, you'll find out. They know it works. They know darn well it did. Okay? You guys did it. That's what Brass Roots is all about, in a nutshell. The other thing that's significant about Brass Roots that you need to know is that we are willing to stand up and be the bad guy. We are willing to take the heat. And by bad guy, I mean that's why we have the crosshairs in our logo. It wasn't by accident. We discussed it. We know what imagery there is with that. We know the press can have a field day with it. That's okay. The National Rifle Association can be the compromisers compared to us. That's okay with us. Somebody has to be the bad guys. Somebody has to define the issue that way. And that's who we are. If that sounds like an organization that you'd be interested in, I would greatly encourage you to do two things. Number one, join, make a contribution, become a member, give us a contribution to help defray mailing expenses and that kind of stuff. Barbara's holding up envelopes in the back. And number two, and this is a separate thing, make a pledge. Make a pledge to defeat an anti-gun politician in this election cycle. You don't have to have the money now. You do have to know that you can put your hands on it. The reason this works is because pro-gun people honor their pledges. That's why it works. They never expected that. But it works. I'd encourage you to do those two things. If you think the Grassroots sounds like an organization, it's for you. That's all on this again, because this is one of the things that's confusing about Grassroots and takes a little bit more explanation. It's the difference between pledges and donations. Don't want you to be confused on this, because the donations help us operate as an organization. It pays for the mailings that goes out. It pays for all the things that we do to keep track of legislation, and the things that we do just takes money. What it does not do, what donations do not do, is they don't ever go into political campaigns. That's how we stay completely away from the PAC laws. None of the money that you give us for operating expenses ever goes to a political campaign. What we do when it comes to political campaigns is we track what's going on around the state. We target races like the Ryan race in the last session, and we ask you to do your part to defeat them with your pledges. That's how the pledge part of the program works. I just want to make sure that everybody understands there's a difference between donations and pledges. We need both to make it. We need both to make it. We need the pledges to have the political clout. We need the donations to find more people like you. Everybody understand that? Great. And also, there's another, you don't have to necessarily be a member or a pledgee to help out. If you absolutely can't afford it, if you just can't make a pledge, and if you can't make a donation, become a friend of Grassroots. If you believe in the issue, if you believe in the organization, become a friend of Grassroots, go on our mailing list, and come in once in a while if you can, and stamp envelopes or do whatever it takes. There's always something that we can use help on. Always. If you call the 800-555-GUNS Grassroots number and tell us that you want to help out, believe me, someone will call you. We'll find something for you to do. Also, those of you who are members of sportsmen's clubs, dog and gun clubs, rod and gun clubs, we're looking for those speaking engagements. And I know that Bruce mentioned this, but I'm going to mention it again, because this is how it happens. This is how we get the word out. I've traveled around the state and spoken to a number of those sportsmen's clubs, and I know it's effective. There are people around the state, and it's kind of a chain thing. A lot of you probably belong to more than one club, and that's the way it is around the state. And you speak at one club, and there's somebody there who's also a member of another club, and it kind of works its way out. Not that everybody who belongs to hunt clubs or shooting clubs is necessarily as committed to the gun issue as we are, but a lot of them are. And that's how we find them. So if you're a member of a club, and if you can get one of our representatives in to speak, that'd be greatly appreciated. We really need that. Okay, what else do we have? Ron Deziel served as the Deputy Corporation Counsel for the City of Dearborn for 10 years prior to his appointment as the city's chief of police in 1986. He earned his Juris Doctor degree from the Detroit College of Law in '73. Over the 11 years as Dearborn's chief of police, Deziel served on numerous boards and committees. He's been the president of the Wayne County Chiefs Association, Southeastern Michigan Chiefs Association, and he's currently the vice president of the Michigan Chiefs of Police Association. He also serves as the Michigan delegate to the International Chiefs Association and serves on that association's legislative committee. Pretty active. Chairman of the MACP's legislative committee, and he's worked with various legislators to promote a wide range of law enforcement legislation. You ready for this crowd?
Ready.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, a warm welcome, please, for Police Chief Ron Deziel. I agree.
Well, that's an impressive welcome, and I appreciate it. You know, as chairman of the Law Enforcement Coalition, that's the group made up of the Michigan Chiefs Association, Michigan Sheriff's Association, Michigan prosecutors that have been very active in opposing liberalization of gun laws in Michigan. I've had the opportunity to give a lot of anti-gun speeches. Somehow, I don't think that speech would work here tonight. So I didn't come here tonight, and I understand that it's a debate format. I should check the time, or is somebody keeping the time? Okay, all right, thank you. I didn't come here tonight to tell you what you already know. I didn't come here tonight to try and convince you what I know you would never agree to. But when Mike called me and invited me to appear before this group, I saw it, I accepted, and I accepted because I saw it as really an opportunity to exchange some ideas, to perhaps look at some common ground, and to try and let you understand, or make you understand, why law enforcement, at least the law enforcement that I represent, has taken the stance that it has over the past few years. Now, first of all, let's all, I was going to say let's all agree to something, and I shouldn't say, I don't expect that anything I say tonight will be agreed by everyone. Let me start off by saying that I am a chief of police. I am a member of the law enforcement community, and law enforcement has a very, very difficult job today. Law enforcement is expected to enforce countless laws, those laws made by local government, by state legislators, by federal legislators. That's our sworn responsibility. Now, it doesn't mean that we agree with all the laws, but it's our responsibility to enforce them. And I think you need to give us, or give me, that, or at least an understanding of our role in society. We don't make these laws, but we enforce them. That's our job. However, because of our role in enforcing laws, there comes a time, or times, when certain laws, new laws are proposed, existing laws are amended, and we feel a real obligation to speak out. Now, that is the case with the gun issue. Law enforcement has felt, because we are so intimately involved with the gun issue, we feel a responsibility to speak out on the issue. Now, whether you agree or not, whether you will admit or not, and I'm sure that you won't, but I'm going to say it anyway, there is, in this country today, there is a serious problem with the availability of firearms. I didn't expect you to agree. There are over 200 million firearms in this country today. There are over 60 million handguns, and each year millions of firearms are manufactured and put into the stream of commerce in our society. The result? Some 40,000 deaths a year as a result of firearm violence. 17,000 homicides as a result of firearms. Now, if you look at our neighbors across the creek in Canada, where you know they have very restrictive gun laws, and while we measure our firearm homicides in the thousands each year. They number theirs in the hundreds, barely 200, more like 100. So it doesn't take a rocket scientist, folks, to figure out that if you wanted to reduce the amount of deaths and injuries from firearms, that you would restrict the availability of firearms. Now, I'm impressed. All right. Now you say, and I expected you to say it out loud, but you say, well, yeah, but the problem is that it's the bad guys that have the guns. And if everyone, the law-abiding citizens, carried weapons, that would even the score and we'd see a hell of a lot less violence. All right? Okay, but... Oh, that's... Okay. The facts are, and the truth of the matter is, that firearms are very rarely used in self-defense. Now, the bad guys, the criminals, they depend on surprise, they depend on sudden force, and the facts are that very few victims have the opportunity to use a firearm in their own self-defense.
Just want to remind you that, number one, we'll have an opportunity to ask questions, and number two, we have, I assume, a very capable rebuttal coming from our executive director. So, that the man deserves some respect. That's right.
Okay, all right. I thought they were doing pretty good, actually. All right, now, listen. You know, law enforcement is on the front line, and we see what's happening as far as the availability of handguns. Let me give you an example. Maybe this will impress you, probably not, but it impresses me. Last Friday, in a 4-hour period, Dearborn police confiscated 4 handguns, all right? In a 4-hour period. That's 1 handgun an hour. Now, Dearborn is not a community that is racked with crime. We experienced only 1 homicide last year. We have very little violent crime in our community. And yet, in a 4-hour period on Friday, we confiscated 4 handguns. 2 of them were found on routine traffic stops. The driver of those 2 vehicles had criminal records. The other weapon was confiscated as a result of an armed home invasion, and the 4th one was used in an armed robbery of a commercial business, an ABC warehouse in Dearborn. My point is that there are too many guns out there. It is too easy for the criminals to carry and use weapons. And what is the problem here? You know, we have a lot of laws. You know that. We have laws that prohibit people from carrying weapons. We have laws that prohibit people from purchasing weapons. We have laws that put people in jail for committing crimes with weapons. We have mandatory jail sentences for people that use weapons in the commission of a crime. What's the problem? Is it the courts that aren't applying the laws? Is it the prosecutors that are not vigorously prosecuting these cases? Is it the corrections system that's not holding these people that have been convicted of crimes? Well, and I say that because, as I said earlier, look at law enforcement as being the enforcers of laws that we don't make, playing that role in society where we enforce the laws, make an apprehension. We don't have much to say on what happens after that. Now, having said all of that, do I personally believe that we can stop, or anybody can stop, the proliferation of guns in this country? Not on your life, or at least not in our lifetime. Do I believe that the answer is to let everyone and anyone carry a weapon? No, I don't believe that. Do I believe that the concealed weapons laws in Michigan need to be amended, revised? Yes, I do. And I think that's why you invited me here tonight, is to talk about concealed weapons laws, the status of the law in Michigan, and where we're going. You need to understand why law enforcement opposed Representative Cropsey's bill, which is House Bill 4720. And you know that there was a lot of controversy over a year and a half, 2-year period. Why did law enforcement take such a stand? I want you to understand why we did, keeping in mind what I've already told you as far as our role in society. Number one, it was estimated that if the CCW laws in Michigan were relaxed, that some 300,000 applications for concealed weapons permits would be received. That's potentially another 300,000 guns out there. Second, there was no, and I submit to you that even today there still is no empirical data as to the experience of those states, and there are 31 states that have liberalized or relaxed laws as far as carrying concealed weapons. What is their experience? Oh, there's a lot of anecdotal information, a lot of stories, a lot of he did this and she did that. But as far as anyone doing a meaningful study that says that liberalized CCW laws will reduce crime or will increase crime, there are studies out there. University of Maryland, the Lott Mustard study, Johns Hopkins study. You've heard all that stuff before. We weren't satisfied at the time that Cropsey's bill was introduced that there was anything that we could point to and say, this is not a good idea because of. We did, as you know, a survey, Epic MRA survey, which showed that 71% of the residents polled in the state of Michigan opposed any change in the concealed weapons laws. We also did a survey in December of 1996, which we have not released, but it shows similar results actually as 75%. 75% of those surveyed indicated they would be opposed to any change in the concealed weapons laws. To us, it means the public doesn't want to change. Those were the reasons that we opposed Representative Cropsey's bill, and as you know, we were successful in holding up the bill and never got out of committee, never got to the House floor, and it died with the end of the session. All right, now, there are those that say that because of the makeup of especially the House in this new session, which is a Democratic-controlled House, that a Cropsey bill won't stand a chance. It's just not going to go anywhere in this session. And I suppose law enforcement could bank on that, and we could say, all right, fine. We opposed Cropsey's bill. We were successful. It's not going anywhere this session. God knows what's going to happen in the following session, especially with term limits, where with resignations, retirements, term limits, we'll probably have as many as 75 new legislators in the House. Nobody knows what's going to happen. Well, you know, it might be good, might be bad. I'm not saying it's going to be good or bad. All I'm saying is there's going to be a tremendous change, and I don't think any of us here, one side or the other, can say that on this issue, in the next session of the legislature, that we will find support for our respective positions. Now, I don't happen to subscribe to that theory that let it lie. It's not going to go anywhere this session. I think we in law enforcement, and I think those that promote liberalization, I think we owe it to the citizenry to resolve the issue. Let's look at the issue in an intelligent manner, and let's try and resolve it. No one's going to get everything that they want, but that's our system of government. That's the way that we operate. Let me suggest to you, and I have, as I mentioned, I have recently talked to Representative Cropsey and Representative Lowe, and here is, for those of you that are taking notes, here is tonight, and this is the reason that I came here tonight, because I want to talk to you about the position of law enforcement. I want to talk to you about the possibility of introducing legislation that will resolve this issue. The position of law enforcement is we do not oppose, get that, we do not oppose law-abiding and sane citizens from carrying weapons.
Great.
What? Great. Okay, well, while you all love me, I'll sit down. No. All right. However, yes, but. Okay. I have 4 minutes. Okay. Yes, but. And yes, but. There are some conditions, some restrictions that we're going to fight for. But I don't think that most people in this room are going to have a real problem with it. And that is, or those are, number one, and I wouldn't even bother with the background checks. I mean, obviously, we don't want convicted felons carrying handguns. We know all that. We don't want those that have been involved in domestic abuse. We don't want those that have been judged mentally insane carrying handguns. All right? Okay. We all agree with that, or we should all agree with that. We want those persons that would be given a permit to carry a handgun to receive adequate training. All right? If you're going to carry a handgun, you got to know how to use the damn thing. And I don't mean a hunter safety course. All right? Probably, probably the NRA is more proficient in training than any other organization, and they have good instructors. My own range instructors are NRA trained. We want those people to carry weapons responsibly. All right? I don't think anyone would disagree with that. And we want those persons to abide by certain restrictions. Now, when we, I'm starting to run out of time, but let me, okay, all right. Thank you. The original Cropsey bill proposed to eliminate the county gun boards. Now, I recognize, and I'd be a fool if I denied it, that out of the county gun boards, there is very little, if any, consistency. That's always been one of the biggest complaints of organizations such as yours. There's no consistency. But you see, when the law was written, it was designed to give a tremendous amount of discretion to the gun board. The gun board made up 2 out of the 3 members being elected officials. The idea was these are elected officials, and if they don't do what the constituents want, they're going to be voted out of office. Well, it doesn't seem to be working that way. What can we do? But I can't agree, law enforcement will never agree to elimination of the gun boards. Do we want to put more voices on the gun boards? We don't have a problem with that. It's been suggested that we put a couple of citizens on the gun boards. Sounds good to me. We don't have a problem with that. We don't have a problem with expanding the membership on the gun board. The way it is now, because the gun board membership is all law enforcement, it fosters that law enforcement versus citizen mentality. And everyone's upset with the gun board. Everyone's upset with law enforcement because they're denying permits left and right. Let's put some different people on the gun board. Don't have a problem with that. We would propose that this gun board, the expanded gun board, in order to issue a permit, be required by law to be satisfied by a preponderance of the evidence that the applicant for a concealed weapons permit, that the applicant for the permit be granted a permit only if, and again by the preponderance of the evidence, the gun board is satisfied that the issuance of the permit would not endanger the safety of the applicant or the general public. Now that, folks, is a major change. You know that the current existing law requires that the applicant show a need. All right? We're suggesting, and it gets down to basic. Right now we're at a may issue state. The proposal is to change it to a shall issue. I'm not sure that this is a shall issue proposal that we're offering, but rather I think we want to keep some discretion with the gun boards, the local gun boards, not perhaps the level of discretion that they have now, but the gun board must be satisfied that the issuance of a permit to the applicant will not endanger the applicant or the general public. Also, we would propose that each gun board adopt procedures and guidelines so that we've got some uniformity across the state, that the gun boards would have to rule within 60 days, so the gun boards are not sitting on applications. There would be a very clear and expeditious appeal process for hunting and target practice. It would be a shall issue procedure. Now, a couple of other restrictions. I'm laying it all out to you, folks. A couple of other restrictions. Concealed weapons would be banned in certain facilities, courts, schools. I don't think you have a problem with that. There is yet to be some debate on whether or not concealed weapons should be carried into sporting events. That's something that we haven't really touched on yet. A posting requirement, which would allow private property owners to post their property, no weapons. Respect the rights of private property owners. They don't want weapons on their property. They should have the right to say no. The concealed weapons laws are in need of revision. And I think what we're suggesting at this point are revisions that should be acceptable to both sides. It is a modification of the law enforcement position, a modification of the position that we've taken over the past couple of years in our fight against the Cropsey bill. The discussions with Representative Cropsey will continue. My purpose in being here tonight is to kind of run those suggestions by you. I'd like to hear your reactions. Once again, I want to thank Mike and John for asking me to come here. I want to I guess I'll come up again in the program, but before I do that, I want to thank you for your attention. It's you've been very, very accommodating. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. You got the audience's attention. Now, Mike Hoban, our Executive Director.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks a lot. First of all, my rebuttal time doesn't start until I start rebutting. I want to thank the Chief for coming, and I want everybody to know here that most people in the grassroots organization do support law enforcement. I myself trained law enforcement people when I was a combat arms instructor in the United States Air Force from all over the state of Michigan and the National Guard, including the state police. As a private instructor, I had a lot of police officers come on the firing line, did a lot of coaching for them cadets, and I've even trained some of the chief's court officers in Dearborn. And as far as the chief's department goes, my wife and I moved from the east side of Detroit, where we had 8 cars stolen in 6 years. And I'd like to say that the Dearborn Police Department is responsible for reducing that rate by 800%. So, I don't want anybody to get the idea, because of the tone of my voice, that it's any way a disrespect for law enforcement. But we're a nation of laws and not men. And what's that? Yes, now I'm in rebuttal. My time. We're a nation of laws and not men. But the supreme law in the state of Michigan, Article 1, Section 6 of our Constitution states, quote, "Every person has a right to keep and bear arms for the defense of himself and the state, period," end quote. The problem is not with the laws, but the men who will regulate the means, but by means of gun control boards or gun boards, whatever you want to call them, chief police policies, and even attorney general's opinions. So the laws aren't really the problem, it's the men that are implementing these laws. They determine whether you have a good reason or are a suitable person to exercise your inalienable rights. Carl Marlinga, Macomb County prosecutor, in his written opinion, in his written legal opinion, states, quote, that under current statutes, under the laws that we have right now, quote, "It is not required to show a necessity for a permit. Desirability will suffice," unquote. The exercise of our constitutionally protected rights are being eliminated in the guise of regulation by men on gun boards and police chiefs' policies. These people are the ones that are sworn to protect those rights. They're supposed to be the protectors. The Supreme Court has repeatedly and consistently ruled that the police have no duty to protect the individual. The courts have also ruled that police have a duty only to the public at large and not the individual in the community, and that a government and its agents are under no general duty to provide public services such as police protection to any particular individual citizen. Now, the right for self-protection at all times is self-evident. You're 3 times more likely to survive or avoid injury if you're armed. 2.5 million people, according to Gary Kleck, University of Florida, 2.5 million people use a firearm to protect themselves, their family, and their property. And when I say use, that doesn't mean they pull the trigger. Most times you only have to show a weapon to protect yourself. That doesn't get calculated into some of the anti-gunners' statistics. It's also our right and our duty that whenever a government becomes destructive to the exercise of our rights, that we alter it or abolish it. Now, we've entrusted the regulation of the exercise of our rights to men on gun boards and police chiefs and the Attorney General, and under their authority as protectors of the public safety, they have abused the trust and the authority by eliminating our individual rights in the guise of regulation. People are routinely denied their right to keep and bear arms. Now we need to decide how we're going to fix the problem. Do we alter the laws and the statutes as the chief is suggesting and allow that abuse to happen again in a system that allows it, or do we abolish that system to make sure that we never have a problem with them abusing our rights again? My opinion is that we eliminate gun boards altogether. To purchase a handgun in the state of Michigan, a person must pass a background check for criminal and mental history. If we add certified, and I'm a certified training instructor, and I agree, I think you should have training before you carry a concealed weapon, just like when you're driving a car. But when you add that training to a concealed weapons applicant, then there is no real need for a gun board. These gun boards have been making us jump through hoops to exercise our rights. And a little later on after the debate, John Kuhn's going to tell you how the people in Vermont and New Hampshire exercise their rights without gun boards and without problems. I was prepared tonight to rebut the Law Enforcement Coalition's objections and arguments allowing citizens to carry concealed weapons for self-protection. Now, these main arguments that they've focused on, and the ones that I'm prepared to rebut here tonight, go as follows. First of all, that the right to keep and bear arms is an individual right and is constitutionally protected, that an armed society is indeed a polite society, carrying of concealed weapons does not create a danger to the general public, and that law enforcement officers at the street level do indeed support the law-abiding citizen's right to carry. Handgun violence and accidental deaths are not an epidemic. Now, if the chief and the Law Enforcement Coalition are willing to concede that we need to change the laws, I didn't really hear him say shall issue yet, but if they're willing to concede to that much, I will accept that as a victory. Since I am not able to study the details and the particulars on the law enforcement's proposal, I'm not really prepared to rebut it or support it. We'll have to look at it and dissect it, and you can better believe that I'll be looking at it with great scrutiny. I'll discuss it very thoroughly with the board of directors, with the membership, and with the network. But for now, I accept the surrender, but not the conditions. How much time I got? First of all, law enforcement officers do indeed support the law-abiding citizens to carry. It's only the gold-braided politicians and the public relations officers who oppose it. It's even worse when it's an unelected official. Okay, on the gun board you got two elected officials, and which are the sheriff and the prosecutor, but then you got the state police. And then keep in mind, chiefs of police are not elected. And what's been going on a lot is the politicians will tell you, yeah, well, I support it. And since they got three of them, they use you as the shell game. My sheriff doesn't support it. And you know the state police guy, he's going to vote you down. So they shuffle you around. The law enforcement, oh, and by the way, all law enforcement people take an oath of office they don't swear to the laws and the statutes and the orders. They swear an oath to the Michigan Constitution and the Constitution of the United States of America. The Law Enforcement Alliance of America, of over 60,000 members, does support the right to carry, and Jim Fotis, the executive director of that organization, will be speaking at our rally. If you were here last month, we had law enforcement in support of the right to carry, and we featured one of our Board of Advisor members, Chief Lon Cripps from Langsburg, and Conservation Officer and former State Trooper Ron Pinson. And it was wall-to-wall like we had it here tonight. And you heard from them, and they proved that the line officers don't have a problem with it. They do not fear the law enforcement or the law-abiding citizen carrying a concealed weapon for his own self-protection. I have personally trained scores of police officers who have told me personally that they support it, but they can't come out publicly because of career pressures or political pressures. And if you don't believe me, don't take my word for it. If you know a police officer that works on the firing line, ask them. They'll tell you. I went to Arizona 30 days after they passed their concealed weapons carry law, and I couldn't find one Arizona state trooper who did not support it. The police officers who were wrong about this, in Florida especially, a year after the CCW law went into effect, Florida Chiefs of Police Association reported to the Palm Beach Post that, quote, "The minute the bill was passed, we asked our chiefs in the state to be particularly alert to any case in their jurisdiction that would give us knowledge of the fact that this right was being abused. At some point, it would appear that the law, at this point, it would appear that the law is working very well. There are no horror stories that can be attributed to the passage of the law." The general counsel for the Florida Sheriff's Association said to the Post, "I haven't seen where we've had any instance of persons with permits causing violent crimes. I'm consistently on the lookout for it." And even our buddies over at the ATF, Robert Cretin, who's the agent in charge of the BATF in Florida, acknowledges that the popular CCW permits aren't a factor in crime, adding that, quote, "the criminal element has no permit." Carrying a concealed weapon does not create a danger to the general public. Currently, 31 states have shall issue, as the chief mentioned, the Lot Mustard study of Chicago. That study shows that the rate of violent crime, now violent crime was reduced, according to this study, by 8.5% in homicides, rape by 5%, and aggravated assaults by 7%. He further concludes that if every other state had a right to carry law, that we would have 1,570 fewer murders, 4,177 fewer rapes, and over 60,000 fewer aggravated assaults without an increase in accidental deaths annually. In just the 6th largest city here in Michigan, our membership director, John Emerson, crunched the numbers, and these are very conservative numbers. These are not statewide. These are just the 6 largest cities, that if that applies to this state, that we would have 45 fewer murders, 78 fewer rapes, and 1,233 fewer aggravated assaults with no increase in accidental deaths annually. There has not been a rash of Wild West shootouts, as Chief Deziel predicted, a year ago, 2 years ago, when we were up in Lansing fighting this. We always hear about these Wild West shootouts. At this point, they've only been able to pick one case in Texas where that particular individual was not, the grand jury failed to indict him, and even under our Michigan laws, that in that particular situation, as I understand it, the man was justified in using deadly force to protect himself. So they pick one thing all the way in Texas. They still can't name one single concealed weapons permit carrier here in Michigan that has gone on a Wild West shootout. And I look for it in the paper every day, as I know the chief does, and what I see instead is not the law-abiding citizens having the Wild West shootouts. Just in last Tuesday's paper, I read of an off-duty East Point police officer who allegedly pulled a gun on an innocent, unarmed individual at after a Tiger baseball game and was arrested. I also read where an off-duty Inkster police officer was allegedly shooting through the front door of a strip bar and hit the bar owner in the face and was charged with recklessly discharging a firearm and causing injury in discharging a firearm at a building. And the worst incident was back in, I believe it was January, when the 2 state police Capitol security officers had a Wild West shootout, spending 40 rounds shooting at each other over fat jokes.
Protect us from our protectors.
Now, state police is the most most well-trained, most elite. I mean, we got people from other states coming to the Michigan State Police for their training. They are put through a vigorous screening process, tested, and put on the firing line for more than 80 hours. I'm sure they get psychological background checks and everything else, and these folks should have been the elite if they were tasked to guard our beloved state capitol and our beloved elected officials. They must have been the cream of the crop. Now, what do we do about this situation? Do we disarm all police officers? Do we disarm just the Capitol Security Police or just the state police troopers? Of course not. That would be ridiculous. That we would punish the majority of the good, honest people for the irresponsible behavior of just a few. This isn't a fair statistic, but we're not playing fair, but the error shooting rate for police officers is over 11%, and the error shooting rate for civilians is less than 2%. Now, they come up against it a lot more than we do, but keep in mind, and this is something I stress in training when I want us to take the same amount of training as police officers, they're on offense and we're on defense. Keep that in mind. Okay, I added some more arguments here, but I think that'll do on that part. Handgun violence and accidental deaths are not an epidemic. Handguns don't cause violence, they're inanimate objects. According to the American Journal of Preventive Medicine Statistics, the total people killed annually in the U.S. With guns, out of that total, 52% are homicides, 52% are, 52% are suicides, 42% are homicides, 4% are actual or are accidental, 1% of them are law enforcement officers, and 1 are of undetermined motivation. And generally, 20 to 25% of those deaths listed as homicides involve self-defense or justifiable homicide. Of the remaining homicides, in other words, the criminal ones, 55% of those are committed by people with a prior violent criminal record.